Good evening and welcome to a very special edition of Ben Shatliff on Sunday. It's not very often that I record in the evening, but tonight's programme is dedicated to the people of Ukraine, as Friday is 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine, which has cost thousands of lives. And of course, tomorrow it is 9 years since the annex of Crimea. All of these actions by Vladimir Putin and the people that support him, as I've already said, have cost thousands of lives. What I want to do, like many others, is help Ukraine have the peace and the freedom that they so rightly deserve. In a few moments' time, I'll be discussing some of the things happening locally to commemorate on Friday, and we will be looking at the headlines which are taking place around the world on this Sunday evening. But for the final time on Ben Shatliff on Sunday, in ordinary time in the church's calendar, I'm going to be reading from the Bible Alive. As you will know, if you're a regular viewer, then I normally read some of this. Initially, we started reading parts of today's Gospel. This will continue during Lent because, of course, Ash Wednesday is on Wednesday. Lent begins. But after Easter, we'll be doing a new format and a revamp for Ben Shatliff on Sunday, looking at a whole variety of new ideas. Today's words from Bible Alive: Jesus didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. The Sermon on the Mount fulfills and completes the Ten Commandments. He underlines certain teachings. You have heard that it was said, and moves on to it. But I say to you, his new understanding expands rather than reduces. The message of the law, making it more radical, yet at the same time more loving. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That perfection includes loving both your friends and your enemies. We're all called to a radical commitment to the good news, which involves being more generous, more prayerful, and more willing to set aside our own needs for the good of others. But loving our enemies sounds like an impossible goal. Jesus is trying to show us the world as God sees it. For God, there's goodness within each person. Our task is to make room for everyone. Firstly, because that's what God does. But secondly, because we don't want to be in bondage to our resentments and fail to grow in our own relationship with the Lord of love. Our efforts will demand much of us spiritually and emotionally, but will pay dividends in a new kind of interior freedom. We've already seen this attitude lived out in Jesus himself, who shows us what God is like. Jesus loved his enemies and forgave those who mocked, scourged, and crucified him. In this sense, we can see that the Sermon on the Mount predisposes us to live a life of self-giving, in imitation of Christ. Of course, we can't live like that. But God's grace enables us to live in a different way, that of the Spirit. Love your enemy, it will drive them nuts. Going the extra mile and being accommodating. Kind and understanding drives those who oppose. Resist and loathe us into confusion. Resentment, anger, revenge, etc. is the human way. Whereas God's way is the way of the Spirit, and where the Spirit is, there's freedom. And it finishes with, Lord, help us to be attentive to your word, to rediscover in Jesus the living God in our midst, and to radiate his love in our needy world. Amen. I normally kind of like make a comment after reading from the Bible alive and say of how it can be communicative with things. You think of certain things and think, yeah, it's relevant, but you also think of when people do acts of evil, like what is happening now with what Putin and his cronies are doing in Ukraine and other parts of the world, and you definitely cannot in any way, shape or form do what God is asking in those scenarios. And that's not me being harsh, I'm being true. Now, as I say, it's Ash Wednesday on Wednesday, so it's Show Tuesday on Tuesday, so it's a case of the pancakes and then giving things up for Lent. This year, I've already started in terms of giving stuff up, because just a couple of weeks ago I was given the news that I'm pre-stage 2 diabetes, which means I've been giving up a whole variety of things. I don't have to not have milk in tea and coffee, but I've now gone from having 2 sugars in coffee with milk, sometimes some cream in it, to having black coffees. Sometimes I'll have some milk in the morning with the first coffee, but I will still have some milk in tea. I've not quite gone to the full drinking tea without milk. So for me, Lent, in one sense, for certain things, started 3 weeks early, and it's what I would normally do, and this happened up until 2019, where I'd normally do either like the Sunfast diet to give all kind of sweet stuff up. I don't know if I'm able to actually do that in case it causes further risks to health. So giving up the sweet stuff and giving up, you can obviously have some kinds of modification still, but I will commit to trying to do good for others during Lent, but beyond Lent as well. So it's but it will be interesting what people decide to give up for Lent. Of course, at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, the big important thing for me at the moment is to see peace and freedom for the people of Ukraine, without any shadow of a doubt whatsoever. And I think everybody understands, and hopefully people do respect that. Now we're going to look at the news stories which have been dominating the news today. We're going to start off with some sad news, and that is that the police have recovered a body near where Nicola Bulley went missing just over 3 weeks ago, 23 days ago to be precise. The latest news is that up until now, unless anything has developed, and I do have updates in front of me as well, but unless anything else has officially been notified, then the body has not been identified as yet. So all thoughts and prayers are with Nicola and her family and friends. What has obviously been a very, very, well, you can't really. There's no words that can be said there, but obviously thoughts there are with all the people that have been looking for Nicola, and that is all that I can say. I'm also aware at the moment that the BAFTA Awards are taking place in London. This week, there has been news on the political front that Nicola Sturgeon is stepping down as the leader of the Scottish National Party and, of course, First Minister of Scotland, respectively. And people have been throwing their hats into the ring this weekend to try and replace her. So Keir Starmer has said that if Labour wants a path to victory in the general election, which will be at some stage next year, then Scotland must be a priority in terms of must those seats in Scotland must be ones to be won to help actually get that victory. And there's no ifs or buts about that whatsoever, because of course, being involved in politics for a long time, as soon as when we were talking about the Scottish referendum back in 2014, it was said at the time that if seats are lost in Scotland, or if Scotland goes, then that could be the end for a Labour government. Now, of course, the Scottish National Party ended up out of the 49 seats, I believe. They ended up with 46 in 2015. Then it was left with one Labour, one Conservative, and one Liberal Democrat. It's slightly similar to that now, but those numbers might be slightly different because then they lost seats in 2017, but then it kind of went into a similar 2015 style back in 2019. And that's, of course, was when they then leave out the Liberal Democrats. To Swinson lost her seat as well, which was another prediction, which I said she'd lost in 2015, got it back in 2017, and then went again in 2019. Also, it's been announced today that the former senior Tory MP, Damien Green, he's been rejected as a candidate in the next general election. This is for the newly created Weald of Kent constituency. Now, bearing in mind that there's boundary changes that have been going on, all kinds of different stuff, there's a lot of confusion because, of course, with various different changes of prime ministers and various different things. So that will be something to watch now, because, of course, if he was going to stand down like others have done, Matt Hancock's standing down, many others are as well, then he would have already announced that before Christmas or just after Christmas. So it's be interesting to see exactly what's going to happen there for Damien Green. North Korea says its latest missile launch demonstrates its powerful physical nuclear deterrent. It is a ballistic missile, ICBM, and it's demonstrated its powerful physical nuclear deterrent and its efforts to turn its capacity fatal nuclear counterattack on hostile forces. Tomorrow it is 9 years since Vladimir Putin and the Russians annexed Crimea. Friday is 1 year since Putin and the Russians invaded Ukraine. We know that thousands of people who died as a result of these evil actions. Over the last year, I've been going to the rallies, Manchester stands with Ukraine, and despite all the tragedy and everything else, I've made some wonderful friends. And once this all comes to an end and peace and freedom is restored, we'll keep that family friendship connection forever. There's no ifs or buts about that. And I've got to learn more of the Ukrainian culture and the various different traditions and everything else. And that's why I speak about this on Bench Shatliff on Sunday. And tomorrow I'll do another special programme tomorrow evening at some stage, just seeing if, obviously, with 9 years on. And then, of course, on Friday morning, I'm going to do a special edition, which will be at 8 o'clock on Friday morning. So please join me live for that. And, of course, as the week goes on, if anything, in terms of any developments, then I will do some special programs either through YouTube or through other forms of social media. And Ben Shatliff on Sunday will be back as normal next Sunday. Now, here in Manchester, there are events, there are special masses which are going on at the Ukrainian church in Cheetham, which is taking place at 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Friday. And everybody is welcome at the Ukrainian Centre in Cheetham Hill, which from 7 o'clock onwards. On Saturday, our Manchester Stands with Ukraine March will be taking place from 2 o'clock at Piccadilly Gardens, followed then by the rally from 3 till 4. The march will go from the city through the city centre. We've done quite a few of those over the last 12 months, and we've had a wonderful reception from people well wishing and showing support. And of course, we will actually be leaving from the Ukrainian Centre at 1 o'clock on Saturday, walking into Manchester, marching into Manchester, and marching round. And there will be a special service at Manchester Cathedral next Sunday evening. I'm not sure the time as yet, but when I get some more details, I will relay that as well. Now, what I want to do, while still doing the news, is just actually speak about some of the things which have been said today. Now, these 2 missiles were dangerously close to causing nuclear catastrophe, warns a power plant, and China had been mulling supply arms to Russia. Now, on Friday, it was also revealed about a new missile that was being tested in South Africa. Now, the South African president is claiming that he is neutral. Well, how can he be neutral if he's allowing the Russians and China to be testing missiles? And these aren't just ordinary, an ordinary kind of missile. These are very powerful ones. The Chinese president has said he's going to be doing a speech on Friday where he says it will be regarding peace. Yesterday, our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, at the Security Conference Summit taking place in Munich, he has said he wants the world to be supplying the planes for Ukraine, and he said he wanted that to be done now. He wants people to wants countries to be doubling up their support for Ukraine, which, I will say absolutely fantastic to what Rishi Sunak has said there, but I will say something further. Let's get this done now to help Ukraine so that the war can end. Vladimir Putin and all the other ones who are all supporting him be brought to justice. Ukraine needs that peace and the freedom. I want to emphasize on the 2 words. Obviously, peace is what is needed, but also Ukraine to have the freedom. So never again are they ever going to be having the Russians dictating and saying what they should or should not do. Don't forget that in 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, then a lot of these countries that had been under the perestroika and the Soviet rule for many, many years were able to get their own duly right independence. And that is another reason as to why it's been stressed on many, many occasions that Vladimir Putin, he invaded Ukraine, but wouldn't want to end there. He'd then be going to other countries. And already earlier this week, there's been talk of a plot by Russian associates to overthrow the government in Moldova. It's been mooted several times over the last 12 months, or even less than that, about Moldova being next. So we know that Vladimir Putin isn't just up to evil in Ukraine, he's up to evil to try and do even more. And that is why his regime needs to be brought down and the peace, stability for Ukraine needs to be returned. Ukraine is a beautiful country, just like Britain is. And everybody should be able to live their lives like we do in Britain and other parts of the world. It's of no concern to Vladimir Putin if Ukraine want to either be independent, if they want to be part of the European Union, if they want to be part of NATO. It's Ukraine's own free choice. It's also been said as well today, and I'm just going through some of the other stories because obviously there is so much going on, and it's Anthony Blinken has actually warned. He's the US Secretary of State. He's warned China there will be consequences if Beijing provides material support to Russia in its invasion of Ukraine. He said in an interview after meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, that Washington was concerned Beijing was considering supplying weapons to Moscow. Now, the top diplomats of the two superpowers met at an undisclosed location in the sidelines of the Global Security Conference in Munich. Just hours earlier, Mr. Wang had scolded Washington as hysterical at a running dispute over the Americans downing a suspected Chinese spy balloon. So, friends, tonight our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine. Our thoughts are with the people in countries around this world where they don't have the freedom that we so greatly have here in Britain. Britain tonight, we can walk free on our streets. Britain tonight, we may be worried about the cost of living. We may be worried about making ends meet. But we don't have to worry about people invading us, people dropping bombs on us, and doing anything that can disrupt our lives. That's it from this special edition of Ben Shatliff on Sunday. I will be back tomorrow evening with an update on anything which, of course, is going on, and thinking of the people of Crimea 9 years on from the annex. And of course, I'll be here at 8 o'clock on Friday. That's 8 o'clock Friday morning. Once I finish work, I'll be attending the Ukrainian Centre in Manchester on Friday evening. So on this Sunday, February 19th, 2023, I wish everybody a good evening. Take care, and I will leave you with Holy is Your Name. Good night.
My soul is filled with joy as I sing to God my Savior. You have looked upon your servant. You have visited your people, and holy is your name. Through all generations, everlasting is your mercy to the people you have chosen, and holy is your name. I am lowly as a child, but I know from this day forward that my name will be remembered. For all will call me blessed, and holy is your name. Through all generations, everlasting is your mercy to the people you have chosen, and holy is your name. I proclaim the power of God. You do marvels for your servants, though you scatter the proud and holy is your name. Through